Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai has been denied bail in a national security case. Lai will remain in custody after the city's top court said that it would announce its verdict on his bail application on a later date. His return to custody was related to Article 42 of the security law, which says that no bail shall be granted to a criminal suspect or a defendant unless the judge has sufficient grounds for believing that he will not continue to commit acts endangering national security. Now, Jimmy Lai has been charged with colluding with foreign forces. The anti-China activist has been in custody since the 3rd of December. The 73-year-old received a week-long bail late last year. However, he was asked not to leave his house or post anything on social media. A Hong Kong court granted him a $1.3 million bail on the 23rd of December 2020. However, he was ordered back into custody on the 31st of December 2020. Now, the court's decision to grant Lai a bail was criticized by China, as it has been seen, or it was seen, as the first legal victory against the draconian law, which includes jail term for secessionist activities. Jimmy Lai is the most high-profile person to be charged under the city's controversial security law. The media mogul was arrested in August last year after police raided the office of his Apple daily. Lai also faces financial fraud charges. Joining us on this broadcast is Richard Kimber, who's joining us live from Hong Kong. Richard, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Jimmy Lai once again remains in custody. Now, the most high-profile arrest under the new national security law. Now, the questions arise whether this decision has been taken under Chinese pressure, because China had earlier also criticized the bail that was granted to Jimmy Lai.
That's right. The Court of Final Appeal behind me here, Hong Kong's top court, has maintained throughout this process that it's acting entirely independently, that it receives no pressure from either the Hong Kong or Beijing governments. But there is concern here for many supporters of Jimmy Lai and many democracy activists across the city that the courts are not able to act as independently as they used to. And this is an example, they say, of why this is the case, because what we've seen here is a lot of technical discussions taking place within the courts about how to interpret this national security law, and specifically whether it's appropriate for any court to grant bail to a suspect who's arrested under the national security law. As you explained in your introduction there, Jimmy Lai had been granted bail, but that was overturned after an appeal from the government's Department of Justice. The ruling here at the Court of Final Appeal has been in favour of that government appeal, and therefore has sent Jimmy Lai back into custody. So the hope here from the democracy supporters is fading, really, with regards to whether or not there will ever be an opportunity for anybody arrested under the law to be released on bail until their trial begins. In the case of Jimmy Lai, that looks unlikely to happen.
Absolutely, Richard, isn't it? Now, the law punishes anything that China considers to be subversion, secession, terrorism or collusion, and critics say that this law has been actually designed to crush any pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong and stifle any dissent, any opposition to Beijing. Now, also this new law states that the onus is on the defendant, or under this new law it is believed that the onus is on the defendant to prove that they would not be a national security threat, and it's not on the prosecutors to prove otherwise. So the onus is really on Jimmy Lai here, isn't it? In normal circumstances, in Hong Kong's common law-based legal system, the onus traditionally has been on the prosecution to prove the charges.
That's right. Again, we're getting sort of into the technicalities of what's been taking place in the court behind me, but this is very important because it really underlines the future of the way that Hong Kong will operate when it comes to these types of arrests and these types of charges. Jimmy Lai's defence team has already said, just moments after leaving the court today, that it will file another bail application. The court has granted it the permission to do so, but whether or not they're able to do that after the decision today seems increasingly unlikely, and the concerns from many of Jimmy Lai's supporters is what's happened today is basically underscoring the fact that it will be very difficult for any suspect arrested under the national security law to ever be granted bail, which is then another reason why those supporters of Jimmy Lai are concerned about the future in Hong Kong, where they can foresee a situation in which people are arrested under the law and are then not able to have much recourse until their trial begins. And so that's the concern that's gradually spreading throughout the pro-democracy movement here, and has effectively meant that there is much less activity than we were used to seeing in previous years when it comes to political protest, when it comes to political dissent, and that's been effectively the impact of this national security law coming into force.
Richard, Jimmy Lai is just the latest case, isn't it, as far as China's crackdown on pro-democracy movement and any opposition in Hong Kong is concerned. Just recently, more than 50 pro-democracy activists were arrested in Hong Kong as well. The West continues to question this new national security law that has been imposed by China in Hong Kong.
That's right. The city is certainly very different to how it felt just a year ago, when there was still a relatively active legislative chamber here, albeit one that was skewed in favour of the government. Now really there is almost no political opposition here at all, after all of the opposition lawmakers resigned in protest at 50 of their camp being arrested as part of a separate police investigation. And every week now there is a new court case taking place, either in the court behind me or in the nearby High Court or magistrates' courts around the city, where people are being charged over offences relating to protest activities that took place sometimes last year, sometimes even in 2019. So there's definitely a shift in the mood, and talking to some of the people who are coming to witness the events at court today, there is a real sense here that the entire fabric of the city has changed fundamentally since this national security law has come into place. Supporters of this law say that the fabric has changed for the better because there's now stability in Hong Kong. There's no longer protests on the street, there's no longer acts of violence taking place as there were in 2019. But the wider concern among pro-democracy supporters is there may be none of those protests anymore, but equally there's no voice of political opposition at all. And so their concern is that there is a certain inevitability now that without any kind of protest opposition in the city, that gradually Hong Kong will become integrated into China more quickly than perhaps many people here were expecting.
Well, stability at what cost? Because it seems that any sort of opposition, any sort of free speech is being cracked down by the authorities in Hong Kong. Richard Kimber, thank you so much for joining us with the latest from Hong Kong.